WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Monrovia, 7 p.m. in Cotonou. Good evening. Welcome to Newslink on West Africa, Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Here are the top stories. Ghana's parliament turns chaotic as minority walks out, citing unjustified rush to vet Supreme Court nominees.
Can I also have my bite?
We are proceeding to vet the nominee before us.
Chairman, what you are doing is wrong. When we were in power, you never allowed this.
Senegal's parliamentary majority PASTEF calls for municipal elections on January 17, 2027 in accordance with Electoral Code. Open Society Foundation convenes stakeholders forum on human rights in Africa.
In a moment where all the African governments have committed to improving human rights. However, we're seeing a decline in the practical commitment.
ECOWAS strengthens ties through Thailand-Africa Initiative for Sustainable Development. Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Augustine Bill Coley.
Thank you for being with us. We begin in Ghana, where minority members in parliament boycotted the vetting of 3 Supreme Court nominees today after the Appointments Committee rejected an objection by Minority Leader Alexander Afenyo-Makin. Afenyo-Makin had called for the process to be suspended, arguing that Parliament and the Ghanaian people needed more time to scrutinize the nominees before their vetting. However, Committee Chairman Bernal Ayufo dismissed the request, describing it as an attempt to discriminate against the nominees. The disagreement triggered a brief confrontation before the minority members walked out, while the majority proceeded with the vetting. Elikplim Awuku reports from Accra.
Earlier in the day, the Appointments Committee had vetted 2 ministers designate. Dr. Zaneto Ajiman Rawlings, nominated for the Environment, Science and Technology portfolio, and Mahama Yariga, nominated Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs. The committee then turned its attention to the 3 nominees for the Supreme Court, but the process was interrupted by an objection from Minority Leader Alexander Afenyo-Makin. He called for the vetting to be suspended, arguing that Parliament and the public needed more time to scrutinize the nominees. However, Committee Chairman Bernard Ahiafo rejected the request, leading to a heated exchange and the eventual walkout by minority members.
The two-sided house. Can I also have my bite?
Well, I'm considering what you are doing to be an attempt to delay and derail. So we are proceeding to vet the nominee before us.
Chairman.
Clerk of the committee,
Chairman.
I'll call upon you.
The clerk, you know. The clerks, it is not your duty. No, it is not your duty. What you are doing is wrong. When we were in power, you never allowed this.
Despite the minority's boycott, the committee proceeded with the vetting.
I considered his objection to be frivolous, vexatious, unmeritorious, baseless on the facts, the rules, and the law. Therefore, I will accordingly dismiss the objection by the minority leader in limine.
Majority Leader Mahama Yariga also defended the decision to proceed, insisting that delaying the Supreme Court nominees after vetting the ministers designate would amount to discrimination.
Even for you as a minority leader, it will not be fair that you say that in the case of myself and Honorable Zaneto, because we are your colleagues, you are willing to pat us on the back by waving, and yet when it comes to the judges, you will not accept it. On what basis are you discriminating between us and the judges? We should treat each other fairly.
With Parliament's emergency sitting set to expire on Friday, pressure is now mounting on the Appointments Committee to complete the vetting process and move the nominations forward before the House rises. For WADR, Elikplim Awuku, Accra.
Here in Senegal, the majority party in the National Assembly PASTEF is pressuring the government to conduct the next municipal council elections on January 17, 2027. In a communique issued on Wednesday, the party formally requested the Minister of the Interior and Public Security to begin the electoral process. Copies of the request were also sent to President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and the National Autonomous Electoral Commission, known as SINA. Abdullahi Hassan explains the details of the party's concerns.
PASTEF's call centers on the renewal of departmental and municipal councils. These local representatives were elected on January 23, 2022 for a 5-year term. Now, PASTEF argues that under Articles L236 and L269 of the Electoral Code, new elections must be held within the 30 days preceding the end of that mandate. Because the Electoral Code also requires elections to take place on a Sunday, the party calculates that Sunday, January 17, 2027, will be the latest possible date for the local elections. But there is a problem. No presidential decree setting the election date has yet been issued by the President or the National Autonomous Electoral Commission, SENA. PASTEF is also raising concerns about electoral deposit. Under Articles L247 and L282, the deposit must be determined by ministerial order after consultation with the relevant stakeholders no later than 150 days before the election. According to the party, that deadline has already passed without the required amount being published. PASTEF therefore argues that the absence of action by the authorities cannot result in a de facto postponement of the elections. The party says the electoral calendar is legally binding and applies to everyone, including the President of the Republic. The message from PASTEF is clear. It wants the government to respect what it considers to be the deadlines established by the Electoral Code, and it says it is prepared to use all legal and republican means available to ensure that voters can exercise their rights to choose their local representatives.
Abdullahi Hassan with those details. Now to human rights. The Open Society Foundation's OSF is bringing together regional human rights actors in Botswana for a 3-day meeting on reshaping the future of human rights in Africa. It runs until August 28 with representatives of the UN Human Rights Commission Office, Botswana's Parliament, and key African human rights institutions and networks. Discussions are forming part of a Wadr Africa-wide process aimed at identifying the region's key challenges, opportunities and priorities, and developing practical solutions to strengthen human rights. Adama Dembele, Program Manager with OSF's Protecting Rights Defenders Initiative, explains why the gathering matters at this critical time.
With all major reports mentioning a decline in democracy, in the human rights protection, and also a significant increase in active war. As a matter of fact, some of the reliable statistics mention about more than 50 active conflicts in Africa as of October last year, representing 45% increase since 2020. And since 2020, Africa has experienced at least 17 coup attempts with more than 10 successful coups. So we are in a moment where all the African governments have committed to improving human rights, to promoting and protecting the fundamental rights of its citizens. However, we're seeing a decline in the practical commitment to materialize that protection of human rights. So the Open Society Foundation, alongside with other partners, have initiated this conversation. Things are not going well for human rights. What can we do to really do a radical reflection and discussion? And the difference is at that level. How can we radically question our collective response to the human rights crisis in Africa? So the why is to the context of what's happening in Africa, but the why is also to the context of the global situation where historically Africa has relied on international institutions to promote and protect human rights.
You just listened to Adama Dembele, Program Manager with OSF's Protecting Rights Defenders Initiative.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is exploring efforts to deepen cooperation with Thailand in key areas, including sustainable development. ECOWAS Commission Vice President Damtien Chichendiba made the remarks in Abuja on Wednesday during a courtesy visit by Thailand's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sisak Puchukvo. The Thai delegation, made up of 27 members, held discussions with ECOWAS officials on expanding cooperation under the Thailand Africa Initiative. Imo Edit tells us more.
Talks focus on sustainable development, economic growth, and stronger people-to-people relations. Welcoming the Thailand delegation, Chin Chibija conveyed greetings from ECOWAS Commission President Omar Ture and described the visit as an opportunity to build a stronger and more productive partnership between ECOWAS and Thailand. She also stressed the importance of closer relations between ECOWAS and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, particularly in the areas of peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. For his part, Foreign Minister Sishak Pwangecho reaffirmed Thailand's commitment to development cooperation with ECOWAS. He expressed Bangkok's readiness to explore concrete partnerships that can support West Africa's development priorities. The meeting with Thailand officials formed part of ECOWAS' effort to expand South-South partnerships and strengthen cooperation with countries and regional organizations outside West Africa.
Imo Edit with those details. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has ordered an immediate coordinated military, police and intelligence operation to rescue victims of a mass kidnapping in Niger State. The order follows attacks last week on several communities in Boku local government area of Niger State, where dozens of people, including women, children and elderly residents, were reportedly abducted. The exact number of victims remains unclear, while local officials say 30 people were killed. A video circulating online appears to show hundreds of captives. Tinubu has vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice and ordered security chiefs to provide regular updates until the abducted victims are found. As a reminder, mass kidnappings for ransom remains a persistent threat across parts of northern Nigeria. Let's take you to Liberia, where President Joseph Boakai is defending his government's handling of former Vice President Joe Howard Taylor's arrest and detention amid growing political and public concern. In a nation address Wednesday, Boakai said, however, Howard Taylor is being treated in line with the country's constitution and laws, with her rights to due process and legal representation protected. The president also placed the case within his administration's Wadr crackdown on drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime, insisting that campaign is not targeting any individual or political group. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Parker reports.
Liberian President Joseph Boakai has defended his government's intensified crackdown on drugs and organized crime following the detention and prosecution of former Vice President Joe Howard Taylor. In a televised address late Wednesday, Boakai said Howard Taylor is presumed innocent and has access to legal representation.
It is not the president's role to determine guilt or innocence. That responsibility belongs to our independent justice system. Our democracy will be measured not how we treat those with whom we agree, but how faithfully we uphold the rights of every person.
The former vice president's detention has sparked debate, with some questioning whether the case could have political implications. But President Boakai says the prosecution must be separated from his administration's wider campaign against narcotics and organized crime.
To those who have expressed concern, I say this: your concern is legitimate in democracy, but guilt or innocence must be determined by the court, not by politics, rumor, conjecture, or public pressure.
Before Taylor's arrest, at least 12 people, including from the Drug Enforcement Agency, were dismissed from service for their alleged involvement in the $317 million drug case. The matter is now putting the country's rule of law institutions under scrutiny, with attention focused on whether due process will be applied independently and transparently, regardless of political status. For Newslink on WADR, April Parker, Monrovia.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Ghana's parliament turns chaotic as minority walks out, citing unjustified rush to vet Supreme Court nominees. Senegal's parliamentary majority Pastef calls for municipal elections on January 17, 2027 in accordance with Electoral Code. Open Society Foundation convenes stakeholders forum on human rights in Africa. ECOWAS strengthens ties through Thailand-Africa Initiative for Sustainable Development. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and the sports. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Thank you for staying with us. We are streaming live on YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Let's head to the Gambia, where the country's electoral preparations have been scrutinized with just over 3 months to the December 5 presidential election. President Adama Barrow is meeting with a high-level pre-election delegation at the State House, led by former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, and former Nigerian Electoral Commission Chairman, Professor Atahiru Jiga. The delegation is in the Gambia to assess the electoral climate, engage key stakeholders, and gauge the country's readiness for the crucial presidential vote. From Banjul, Rose Samarakates reports.
The 5-day mission running from August 24th to 28th is led by former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield and former Nigerian Electoral Commission Chairman Professor Atahiru Jiga. Professor Jiga says the mission is seeking first-hand information on the electoral environment and ways to strengthen the credibility, fairness, and peaceful conduct of the polls.
We are really pleased with the honor of meeting His Excellency Mr. President today and listening to him and getting greater insights on the preparations leading to the election. So we are hopeful that things will turn out right for the Gambian people, and we are only here to add value to the integrity of the process.
Ambassador Thomas Greenfield brings an international perspective through the assessment.
We're a pre-election delegation to look at the electoral process leading up to the election on December 5th of this year. We're meeting with civil society, we're meeting with the opposition, we've met with the president and discussed with the president his assessment of how things are going, and we look forward to having those same discussions with others.
State House says President Adama Barrow has assured the delegation of his commitment to peaceful, credible, and transparent elections. The visit comes as political parties step up preparations for the December vote, with growing tensions on whether all contestants will have a fair and level playing field. The delegation is expected to release its preliminary findings at the end of the mission on August 28. For WADR, Rose Samarakates, Banjul.
Elsewhere in Benin, a new wave of confusion is breeding within the main opposition party, the Democrats. 20 officials from the party's grassroots structures in the Littoral Department have been suspended for what the party describes as serious offences. The decision was officially signed on August 24 by Gafari Adekokan, Vice President in charge of the Littoral region. Francis Boniface gives the details.
According to the document, the suspensions follow evaluations and reports submitted by the interim coordinators of the 15th and 16th electoral districts. The officials in question are accused of acts of indiscipline and denigration against party leaders, both in person and online. The Democrats' party leadership also accused them of attempting to sabotage party activities and failing to comply with the resolutions adopted at the National Councils of March 22 and April 4, 2026. According to the communication, the suspension takes effect immediately and supersedes any previous conflicting provisions. This decision comes at a particularly difficult time for the Democrats, led by Nure Nuachadi. For several weeks, the party has been facing a series of departures from its leadership. The most recent case is the August 18 resignation of Nadine Okumasun, who until then held the position of deputy head of communications. Party observers said the Democrats will now have to manage these new internal tensions as the party seeks to maintain its cohesion and influence on the Beninese political scene.
Francis Boniface reporting. Now, away from the West African sub-region, Uganda has officially declared the end of its Ebola outbreak after 42 consecutive days without a new confirmed case. The World Health Organization and Africa CDC say the outbreak caused by the Bujubuyo species of Ebola recorded 20 confirmed cases with 18 recoveries and 2 deaths. The outbreak was declared on May 15, 2026 after the country's last patient was discharged from hospital on July 16. Authorities say more than 800 contacts were identified and monitored during the response. WHO and the Africa CDC are urging Uganda to maintain strong surveillance and cross-border cooperation, particularly because of continued population movement and trade with the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Ebola transmission is ongoing.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest this evening is Adama Dembele, Program Manager with OSF's Protecting Rights Defenders Initiative. In this interview, he explains the details of a 3-day meeting on reshaping the future of human rights in Africa. The event underway in Botswana is an initiative of the Open Society Foundation, bringing together regional human rights actors. Mr. Dembele explains why the gathering matters at this critical time.
With all major reports mentioning a decline in democracy, in the human rights protection, and also a significant increase in active war. As a matter of fact, some of the reliable statistics mention about more than 50 active conflicts in Africa as of October last year, representing 45% increase since 2020. And since 2020, Africa has experienced at least 17 coup attempts with more than 10 successful coups. So we are in a moment where all the African governments have committed to improving human rights, to promoting and protecting the fundamental rights of its citizens. However, we're seeing a decline in the practical commitment to materialize that protection of human rights. So the Open Society Foundation, alongside with other partners like the African Commission, the Network of African Human Rights National Institutions, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, have initiated this conversation. Things are not going well for human rights. What can we do to really do a radical reflection and discussion? And the difference is at that level. How can we radically question our collective response to the human rights crisis in Africa?
From the conversations so far, guided by OSF alongside partners, what are some of these key issues that have come up that are concerning or disturbing or alarming, and that you have said in your word require this radical approach?
So we are at the first meeting of the series of conversation, and this is day one. We yet go deeper, but so far we really trying to see what reimagining means. Some of the first session are setting that base, the tone to what we mean by reimagining, but also talking about the inclusive development and some of the critical economic aspect of human rights, because to us, we're not only seeing that political and civil rights, that has mostly our attention on this continent when we talk about human rights, but how economic inclusion and economic and social rights are also considered.
In your opinions, given that you are a human rights expert, you've held a series of discussions, you've delivered speeches and statements and presented research work, what should a future fit human rights agenda look like for Africa in the future?
Well, that's a good question we're hoping this conversation to give, but I would try to maybe give a picture. I think in a very short way, the future human rights situation agenda should be the one that answers to the best to the people's demand vis-a-vis the decision maker. That's a shorter way to present it but we're hoping this conversation would clearly outline that.
Now, as we wrap up this interview, Mr. Adama, how do you intend to push through with whatever comes out of this convening?
As civil society, as partner, we have limited power when it comes to implementation. However, we've managed, or we've made sure that we are working with partners like the African Commission, but also government. For example, in Botswana, we are partnering with Botswana government. And even in the upcoming convenings or meetings, would also make sure we involve state parties, policymakers, to be in the room for not only as a recipient of our recommendation, but co-create, co-ideate some of these ideas. And we also believe this room is not enough to make final decision, but how do we, at some point, ideas coming from it, act upon it, or look for other partnership to really make sure that reimagining we preaching goes beyond putting the idea on table, but at some level there is decision to implement them.
Adama Dembele is program manager with OSIWA's Protecting Rights Defenders Initiative. Now in sports, South Sudan's yet joint stars have reached the semi-finals of the CAF Women's Champions League CECAFA qualifiers in Kigali, Rwanda for the first time in the club's history. Yet joint stars topped Group A after recording a 3-0 win over Eritrea's Denden FC, a 1-0 victory against Mafunzo Women of Zanzibar, and a 1-1 draw with hosts Ryan Sports. They will face Kenya Police Bullets in Saturday's second semi-final. In the other semi-final, Group B winners Kawempe Muslim Ladies of Uganda will take on defending champions Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. Kawempe Muslim Ladies secured maximum points from their two group matches, beating Commercial Bank 1-0 before trashing Djibouti's FC Ujiko 8-0. Commercial Bank advanced as the best second-placed team after a heavy 11-0 win over FC Ujiko and a defeat to Kawempe Muslim Ladies. Kenya Police Bullets also won both their Group C matches, beating Tanzania's Simba Queens 2-1 before defeating Burundi's Top Girls Academy 3-1. The semi-finals will be played on Saturday, with the winners advancing to represent the CECAFA region at the CAF Women's Champions League finals. That's the latest in the world of sports. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Shekinjai for the technical support. To interact with us via our social media platforms, including X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Augustine Curley. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio.